Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man! Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's nice to get such a warm welcome. If you will allow me for one moment, can the Prime Minister tell the House where in his election manifesto he put his plan to abolish maintenance grants for all students?
First of all, people will recognise no welcome for the thousands of people who found work in our country. What a depressing spectacle. In our manifesto, we said we would cut the deficit and we'd uncap student numbers, and we've done both.
Jeremy Corbyn!
There's not such joy in Port Talbot and other places that have lost steel jobs, and they want a government that's prepared to support their industries. The Prime Minister has form here concerning student maintenance grants, because in the Conservative manifesto there was no mention either. Are you done?
Let me very gently say to the dedicated Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretary.
Calm yourself, man!
Auditioning to be a statesman doesn't include chuntering from a sedentary position, man.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, the Prime Minister has form here, because there was no mention of tax credit cuts in the manifesto either. This proposal will affect 500,000 students, not anywhere in his manifesto. I have a question from a student by the name of Liam, who says, I'm training to be a mathematics teacher and will now come out at the end of my course to debts in excess of £50,000, which is roughly twice as much as what his annual income would be. Why is Liam being put into such debt?
What I would say to Liam is that he's now in a country with a university system with more people going to university than ever before, and more people from low-income backgrounds going to university than ever before. In addition, what I'd say to Liam, and I wish him well, is that he will not pay back a penny of his loan until he's earning £21,000. He will not start paying back in full until he's earning £35,000. And our policy is actually going to put more money in the hands of students like Liam, which is why we're doing it. By contrast, the Labour policy, which is to scrap the loans and scrap the fees, which would cost £10 billion, would mean go back to a situation where people went out, worked hard, pay their taxes for an elite to go to university. We're uncapping aspiration. He wants to put a cap on it.
Well, I'm pleased to say, Mr. Speaker, that Liam is actually trying to be a maths teacher, which might be able to help the Prime Minister, because he did say he was earning £25,000, which is more than £21,000, if that's a help. In 2010, his government... In 2010, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's government trebled tuition fees to £9,000, defending it by saying they would be increasing maintenance grants for students from less well-off backgrounds. They're now scrapping those very same grants. They used to boast about them being increased. Where is the sense in doing this? Why are they abolishing those maintenance grants?
The sense in doing this is we want to uncap university places, so as many young people in our country who want to go to university can go to university, and that's what we're doing. And before too much shouting from the party opposite, when they were in government, it was Labour that introduced the fees and loans system. Now, given this is the week Given this is the week we're meant to be learning the lessons of the last election, let me read a lesson from someone, frankly, I rather miss, Mr. Ed Balls, who wrote this week in the Times Higher Education Supplement, and he said this: "We clearly didn't find a sustainable way forward for the financing of higher education. If the electorate think you've got the answers for the future, they'll support you." And I would say, in all honesty, to the Labour Party, when they were in government, they supported fees and loans. When we were in opposition, we made the mistake. We made the mistake that they did. If you want to be on the side of aspiration, if you want to be on the side of more university students, if you want to help people make the most of their lives, the system we've got is one that's working, and the numbers prove it.
Mr. Speaker, that's from the very same Prime Minister who's taking away the grants that are designed to help the poorest within our society and give them access to higher education. I want to ask him about one particular group, though, that are being targeted by this government now: student nurses. Not mentioned in the manifesto, the repayments that student nurses will have to pay when qualified amount to an effective pay cut of £900 for each nurse. Why is he punishing them when we need these nurses within our NHS?
Well, first of all, there are 6,700 more nurses than when I became Prime Minister. But the facts are these. I know the Labour Party doesn't want to face up to difficult decisions, but let me just give him this one statistic. Today, 2 out of 3 people who want to become a nurse can't become a nurse because of the bursary system. So by introducing the loans, nurses will get more money, will train more nurses, and will bring in fewer from overseas. It's good for nurses, it's good for the NHS, and it's good for our country. And it's only a Labour Party that is so short-sighted and so anti-aspiration that can't see it.
The Prime Minister and I would probably agree that we need to be spending more and directing more resources in dealing with the mental health crisis in this country. And I've got a question from somebody who wants to help us get through this crisis by becoming a mental health nurse. And it's a woman called Vicky from York, and she's got a very real problem. I would not have been able to or chosen to study to be a mental health nurse without a bursary for the following reasons. I'm a single mum, I need support for childcare costs, I've got debts from a previous degree. I'm a mature student of 33, I would not take on further debts which would be impossible for me to pay back and be fair on my daughter. She is somebody who we need in our NHS, we need as a mental health nurse. We are losing her skill, her dedication, her aspiration to help the entire community.
But 2 out of 3 Vickies that turn up wanting to be nurses are sent away by our current system. So we're bringing people in from Bulgaria or Romania or the other side of the world to do nursing jobs we should be training British people who want to do. The British people want to train as nurses. The NHS wants those nurses. This government will fund those nurses, so let's help them train and improve our health service.
The problem is you're expecting Vicky and others like her to fund themselves by paying back a debt or paying back from their wages in the future. I don't think she's been very reassured by the Prime Minister's answers today. Unconvincing to her. However, he wasn't very good at convincing the Honourable Member for Lewis, a nurse herself, and she said, I would have struggled to undertake my nurse training given the proposed changes to the bursary scheme. The Prime Minister will be aware that 9 out of 10 hospitals currently have a nurse shortage. Isn't what he's proposing for the nurse bursary scheme going to exacerbate the crisis, make it worse for everybody, and make our NHS less effective than more effective? What is his answer to that point?
I'll give him a very direct answer, which is we're going to see 10,000 extra nurse degree places because of this policy, because we're effectively uncapping the numbers that can go into nursing. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, this week has all been of a piece, a retreat of the Labour Party into the past. We've seen it with wanting to bring back secondary picketing, with wanting to bring back flying pickets. We've seen it with the idea of stopping businesses paying dividends, and with the absurd idea that nuclear submarines should go to sea without their missiles. Anyone watching this Labour Party, and it's not now just the leader, it's the whole Labour Party, they are a risk to our national security, a risk to our economic security, a risk to our health service, and to the security of every family in our country.
Cole McCartney.
Thank you, Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that our nuclear deterrent only works against our nation's enemies if our nuclear submarines are actually equipped with nuclear missiles? And that those, such as the Leader of the Opposition, who do not believe this, have a defence policy inspired by the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, and shows that while the members opposite may twist and shout, their current leader certainly needs help.
I congratulate my honourable friend on his ingenious question. Look, there's a comic element to sending submarines to sea without missiles in, but in fact it is absolutely serious, because the deterrent has been, on a cross-party basis, an absolutely key part of our defence, and making sure we've got the ultimate insurance policy, which we support on this side and we should vote on in this House. And all I can say when it comes to Beatles songs, I suspect that the Leader of the Opposition prefers back in the USSR.
Order.
Well, it's 36 minutes after 12 o'clock. Prime Minister's questions overrun, as it usually does these days. It's now come to an end. Jeremy Corbyn, as Laura accurately predicted, went first of all on student grants and the change of student grants into loans. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then moved on to bursaries for nurses, both issues linked. And he used all 6 questions on these 2 issues. We'll come back to that and get our reaction from our panel when we've heard what you thought of it. Joko.
Clear division, Andrew. Mark Bradley says, yet again, the Prime Minister didn't answer Jeremy Corbyn's questions. But because of the lack of leadership and teeth from Jeremy Corbyn, the Prime Minister walked over the Labour leader. Richard Stanley said, finally a week where Jeremy Corbyn has scored some good blows against David Cameron, digging the Prime Minister into a hole on details around student fees and NHS nurses worked well and left the Prime Minister struggling with his pre-scripted answers. David Kidd said Jeremy Corbyn stumbles over his questions and is, I'm afraid, no match for David Cameron when it comes to debating on his feet. Corbyn's questions from correspondents are tedious and totally ineffective. Constituents, I think he means. And Catherine Jenkins, the Prime Minister's declarations appear callous even whilst attempting to appeal to normal people, whilst Jeremy Corbyn seems ever more confident, appearing as the strongest and fairest leader, effectively challenging government failure and speaking up for the public.
Okay, thank you. Laura, it's interesting that Mr Corbyn is still using his crowdsourcing technique.
Indeed. Today there was Liam and Vicky. He's not using it all the time. He's sort of got rid of the idea of going through all of Prime Minister's questions with source questions from the public. But clearly, I think his team think it's a useful device and it's a way of sort of humanising these issues. I mean, most politicians in opposition are no stranger to the case study, I suppose we would call them, but it's useful he's using that. I think today we did see these are good, strong issues for Jeremy Corbyn. They have cut through with lots of people around the country. These are changes that are happening to people's lives. No question about that. But I think, as one of the emailers suggested, the Prime Minister is not really put under very much pressure by Mr Corbyn in the manner that he asked the questions. And again, something we've discussed before, he's not really very much into the follow-up, the art of the follow-up.
The ad-lib follow-up.
The ad-lib follow-up. It was a good question. Why wasn't this plan in the manifesto? The government wants to make a change that will affect thousands and thousands of students, and it wasn't in the manifesto. But he sort of let it go, in a sense. Interesting, though, just one final thought. I think we're really seeing the Tories sort of coalescing and sticking to, now carving out this sort of attack line that we're going to hear again and again and again, different to how they approached Jeremy Corbyn before Christmas, about this idea of going back to the past, Labour looking not just inside itself, but back to the bad old days of the 70s and 80s. And you heard it there with planted questions on nuclear weapons and the secondary picketing. Yeah. And then Nigel Dodds from the DUP raising the issue of the Falklands.
Indeed.
That's all, folks.